So back earlier this year, we talked about how little Donald Trump actually does when he works. Uh, so we learned that he gets executive time, right? Axios had actually obtained an inside look into Donald Trump's schedule. So we found out that he's doing far less work than he had promised. That's actually kind of a blessing in disguise in reality because imagine how much damage he could actually do if he were actually, working. But look in that schedule that Axios had taken a look at and published. Um, Apparently, we found out that Donald Trump gets large blocks of time to which he does whatever the hell he wants, and they called it executive time. That was the euphemism created by John Kelly, so that they actually didn't have to write down that Donald Trump is basically dicking around and being super lazy, eating cheeseburgers on the bed watching Fox News. Executive time sounds so much better. So, now why do I bring this up? This is an old story, right? Wrong. It's a new story. 9 months later, they decided to follow up. And who's following up this time is Politico. Now, we thought it was bad before. It's actually worse. 9 months later, it turns out Donald Trump is actually doing less work than he was before. Oops. And of course, when he does actually decide that, hey, I'm going to work today, it's usually, according to Vanity Fair, signing ceremonies, yelling at aides, and crafting policy around things that he sees on Fox News. Of course. Writer for Vanity Fair says last Tuesday's schedule, for instance, included 9 hours of executive time. That's triple the time that was allotted for actual work. Trump's first commitment of the day came at about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And while he had a 30-minute call with CEOs, which is fun for him, I think, as well as dinner with senior military officers, the rest of the day consisted of doing just whatever he wanted. And that's it. Sometimes for stretches as long as 2 hours and 45 minutes. I mean, what did he do in that time, by the way, that he had off? Well, he basically tweeted and trashed Puerto Rico's elected officials and tweeted out videos of himself fear-mongering about immigrants, the immigrant caravan. Well, what about last week? They looked at last week, and apparently a bulk of the president's time was spent going to political rallies and campaigning on behalf of Republicans. Now you say, well, come on, that's work, right? No, Donald Trump loves this. He loves getting in front of a crowd of very enthusiastic, cheering supporters and saying whatever the hell he wants. That's fun for him. Because, again, he's an attention-seeking narcissist. So standing in front of people and saying what's on his mind, well, that's fun for him. It's almost like saying, like, oh, getting in front of a camera and talking about the news, that's work for me. Well, it is work, true. But say I decided not to do any research or take any notes, and I just got in front of the camera and said anything that came to my head. That's what Donald Trump is doing. That is not work. That's not work. He's actually not working. Now, on Wednesday, which began with an 11:30 a.m. meeting with John Kelly, he delivered brief remarks on the opioid crisis, and sat for a media interview before going to a rally in Wisconsin. The rest of his day, according to his schedule, was completely open. I got nothing else to do. Now, what about policy, right? Now, he's the president and should be able to set policy, right? Well, according to this report, the president spent a little more than 2 hours this week in policy briefings and was scheduled to receive the president's daily brief on just 2 of the 5 days reviewed. Now, the thing is, there are a lot of people in his cabinet saying, well, he works really hard because sometimes he pulls them into the office to do an impromptu meeting on an idea, right? In fact, a person familiar with the president's scheduling told Politico, quote, you might read something in the paper and immediately you get an impromptu meeting on trade. Does anybody actually believe that he reads? I don't think he does. No, in reality, here's what happens. He was watching Fox and Friends earlier this morning. or earlier in the morning, and it was like, ooh, I got a policy idea. In fact, he has been known to call up Fox and Friends to say, or Fox News in general, to thank them for giving him a policy idea. Oh, that's wonderful. But of course, most of the rest of his time is yelling at CNN, for example, or the New York Times, the failing New York Times, Washington Post, and of course spreading conspiracy theories, like how prominent Democrats have been mailing themselves crude pipe bombs as a distraction from, the midterms. In fact, here's one of his tweets. Republicans are doing so well in early voting and at the polls, and now this bomb stuff, yes, he put it in quotation marks, happens and the momentum greatly slows. News not talking politics. Very unfortunate what is going on. Republicans, go out and vote. And during another block of unstructured time, he complained about a story published in the New York Times revealing that Chinese and Russian intelligence agents basically eavesdropped on his unsecured cell phone calls, arguing that the, quote, long and boring article was so incorrect that he did not have time to correct it. Quote, story is so wrong. Now, what's funny about that particular thing is he not only tweeted out how untrue it was, he tweeted it from his iPhone. Oops. That's what the guy does in his free time. But again, look, as bad as Donald Trump is, and I said this before, could you imagine how bad he could be if he actually did work? If he wasn't so goddamn lazy. So maybe we're all looking at this a little bit wrong. Maybe having a super lazy president is not such a bad thing, because it could be so much worse. But as far as executive time goes, I wish I had executive time. I'm sure a lot of you out there who bust your ass, people working at construction sites or working in, fast food or working in the factories, do you guys get executive time? You don't get executive time, do you? It just shows you how this guy has never had a work ethic. And as far as I'm concerned, shouldn't the people who are supposed to represent us actually work for us? Like, work. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.